happen to be here in sunny Orlando, Florida with Sister Keri Burnor. So we get to hear what's going on with her, and if you've seen her new video on YouTube, there's a lot of questions to ask. So how's it going, Keri?
Excellent.
What's happening today?
Long time old friend. Good
Yes,
to see you.
it's
Been
good
too
to
long.
see you. And so we all saw this with the Nano. How is this, what is the end game here now?
Expose and share scenarios for remedies, because there's multiple, with every single problem that's been presented in previous videos that I've done, I've always tried to give a remedy or ask the right questions to try to reach one. So thanks for the water, by the way. So basically what I'd like to do today, I know the original intent was for us to get together and a little bit review just some aspects about the news that's coming out with regards to the 301 priests and
yes.
The several kids that are involved in all that. And just for the viewer's sake, I wanted to make it to give a synopsis of, in a nutshell, of my past, my story. Basically, I was a nun for 14 years in the Roman Catholic Church. The Jesuits tried to erase that from my record, but I have the evidence from the Catholic Free Press.
All right, I've seen this. Yes.
Yeah, with my name, Sister Benjamin Burnor, and when Raymond Delisle, the spokesperson for the Worcester Diocese, said I was never a nun, he didn't look into the book to find Benjamin Burnor. He looked to find Sister Keri Burnor, and that was never in there because my name was Sister Benjamin. So I love how the Lord just protects everything. So anyways, basically, I was sexually abused by a priest at St. Joseph's Abbey in Spencer, Massachusetts in 2001, August 23rd. His name was Father Joseph Chukong. And, I had an ongoing relationship to St. Joseph's Abbey that was pretty positive for about, 3.5 years before this incident took place. And, I was very much respected in my path. I was a nun for 5.5 years or 5 years in a community, St. Anne's House, St. Benedict Center in Still River, Massachusetts. That was following immediately after my conversion, right out of high school. Got my diploma from high school, immediately went in, probably about a month later, June 13th, 1993, went into the convent. Now there's a provision where when you're a convert, the Catholic Church doesn't allow you to become a nun until 2 years after your conversion. Well, we found a special allowance for those who want to become oblates, which is something that's not directly, they're like lay associates. So my Mother Superior and we all agreed, so I became an oblate of the community. And again, that's St. Benedict Center in Still River, Massachusetts. And so I lived a wonderful life there. And we had organic farming, and it was awesome. And I was in love because it was all the old, Latin Gregorian chant. We got together and did the office, the divine office.
Yeah, that stuff's beautiful. I've heard the audios and all that, so it's really interesting. You can look that up on YouTube too. I'm sure that's on there, right?
Yep.
Are they not? Okay.
Absolutely. So we would do our Gregorian chant, and then at this point, they were the carriers of a doctrine that was very much suppressed at the time because it was inconvenient at the time in the 1943 or 46 time. And the convent that I was associated with had a founder. The founder and founderess was Sister Goddard Clark, Catherine Goddard Clark, and Father Leonard Feeney. And Father Leonard Feeney was a Jesuit. Now, see, I didn't know, but basically our convent was created from the design of the spirituality of a hybrid, of a mix between St. Benedict and St. Ignatius of Loyola. Now, of course, Ignatius, in my opinion, is not a saint. But the bottom line is that there was an integration of those two spiritualities and manifested into the order that I was a part of. Then, so I leave with the Mother's blessing. I spoke with Mother Teresa Benaway, MICM, Mancipia Immaculatis Cordis Mariae, the slave of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Is the name.
I'd never be able to repeat that, but anyway,
yeah, say
it sounds
10
good.
times fast.
Yeah, I'd never be able to do it, but it sounds good. It sounds good when you say it.
So basically, at this stage, I have the blessing. We prayed about it for a whole entire year, whether I was supposed to stay and maybe be a founder of more contemplative branches of the same order or just veer off. And my original love was for the Cistercian order because of my introduction to St. Joseph's Abbey when I was 15. Prior to my conversion, I went up there and just fell in love with the environment. So essentially, I have the blessing now. I leave the order in 1998, late 1998, and I have to go out into the world. I have to secure a place in the world and start showing that I'm living the life of a hermit. And once I do that, then the bishop would, over several years...
How do you show that? Like live on the street, or what do you do?
Well, you're supposed to get a job, you're supposed to show you have insurance, you're responsible for yourself, so you're not a burden to the Catholic diocese.
I thought that you couldn't have a job, but that was the idea.
That's the, you know, it's interesting. In Orthodoxy, the Orthodox faith is different. They have the most ancient understanding of the role of what a hermit is, and they abide by that even to this very day. But the Catholic Church has kind of integrated, you know, secularism into the hermit,
Really?
status.
Okay, that's
Because when I mentioned this to a priest of the Orthodox faith, and I said, oh yeah, I have to have this, I have to have my 501c3 filed, which I don't operate with 501c3s, by the way, only 508s. And so you have to prove that you're not a financial burden to the diocese.
Right.
So when I showed that book to the priest, he laughed. He said, this is nuts. This is nothing. You know, St. Anthony of the desert, they never had to do any of this stuff. This is taking you in a whole other direction that has nothing to do with being a hermit. I said, that's what I thought.
Well, it would make sense, right? Because are any of the saints filing their IRS forms back in the day? You know, that's not happening.
Yeah, exactly, even though they were established later. But still,
Right.
even in their own communities back then, there was a revered place for them. So, you know, very, very valued in the Greek culture, the hermit life is, and convent and nuns and so forth. So anyway, and there's problems everywhere, but essentially, I go now to this monastery, I return back to Spencer, and I frequent the liturgies there for, you know, several months. And of course, I kept a very, you know, low profile. I would go into the chapel, the side chapel at St. Joseph's Abbey, and pray from the door when it would open at 2:30 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night if I could get away with it.
It's like a full-time job. Is there overtime involved in that too? Like, do you work overtime in that?
The monks even said, oh my goodness, you put in more hours than we do in this chapel.
Yeah, see, that's right.
You know, so I was just in love with it, and I needed that time and that space to really figure out what I wanted to do. So after, like I said, maybe 3 years or so, really bad with chronology. Anyone who wants the hard facts of my matter, you can go to clergyvictim.com/divine_challenge, HTML. You're going to find my book. It's up there for free for now, called Divine Challenge, and it's my story from birth all the way up to the year 2008. And it gets into, you know, an outline and timelines and more, you know, statistical matters and facts. But right now I'm just going off of my memory.
And it's highly technical. Like, you could spend hours on her site. There's a lot of paperwork and all kinds of stuff. So if you think any of it sounds, oh, how could you prove it? She could prove it.
Yeah.
Right, I can tell you that right now.
Voluminous,
Yeah,
about 400
it's all
pages.
over the place, you know.
So now, coming from the point of view of, you know, the incident where this priest, you know, assaulted me sexually, once the priest did that, I was told, you know, I waited for my monk friend to get on duty as the porter, which is one who greets you know, the guests. And I was on retreat that week at the monastery. So I spoke with Brother Erik Markham, and we spoke till 3 in the morning, and he said, don't ever bring this allegation forward. The Abbey will hurt you really badly. He said, don't you understand, you know, that, you know, there's a lot of things he said to me in confidence, but all, you know, bets are off since everything went to the police.
So it's a threat again. So it's like what we see with any type of child abuse. Then it's layered on threats. You're going to lose your job. We're going to come after you, whatever. Or we're going to go after your livelihood,
That's right.
for the most part.
And then eventually what happened is, about a month and a half later, I went to visit St. Scholastica's prior in Petersham, a nun named Sister Mara Malouf, who's no longer there, interestingly. She confided in me, and I told her what happened with the priest, and she says, oh my God, that happened by the same exact priest to a nun, to someone who left the convent that you were from. So she was a layperson at the time. Her name is Miriam. And her documents are on my website. You can get those, again, at clergyvictim.com, and you go to the tab where it says, you know, articles, and it will all be underneath that area. Also, the other part too, if you want a more comprehensive description of the documentation involved in this case, you can go to the military grade tab, click onto that, and then go back to the Wayback Machine tab, and it will give you all the documents and the photographs of St. Joseph's Abbey.
So then, is this true? Because I'm sure a lot of people have heard this. I have. So when a priest gets into trouble, all they do is just like move them somewhere else or ignore it?
They totally ignored it in this case. And, you know, as far as this other woman who went through it about a decade prior to my experience, you know, she tried to bring it forward, and they just said, oh, we'll fix it, thank you so much, and pat her on the head, essentially. And she tried to stop the trial because I went to a priest friend of mine. I was cleaning churches at the time, Father Peter Joyce in Southbridge, St. Mary's. And he basically said, well, I'm going to call the district attorney's office. And I said, well, okay, I'm not a kid. He says, no, that's still a crime. That's, you know, if someone grabbed you like that, that's still wrong. But
isn't there still like a precept or something that where the priest can actually do what they want? Like something along the lines, I thought I heard like they're like a little Jesus, right? Like a little version.
Yes, an alter Christus, which means another Christ. During the functions of the sacrament, the priest operates in the place of Christ, which is totally, in my mind, beyond the beyonds. We're all to be Christ, right? We're all to be, you know, carry the Lord within us.
Yeah, but that sounds like a license to do whatever you want because it's justified then.
Yeah, that's their plan. And their document that backs this up is in the Crimen Solicitationis, the crime of solicitation, which is a document that came out. It came out shortly after the 2002 Boston cases hit, in the Boston Globe and so forth. The movie that features that story, Spotlight, and I knew a lot of the players in that movie, actually.
Oh, so there's a movie that handles that subject?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. And what's the name of that again?
It's called Spotlight.
Spotlight. And do you know what year?
I think it was just maybe a year and a half ago the movie came out. It was pretty fresh, very well done. And they bring up this canon lawyer, trying to think of his name, Father Thomas Doyle. And he brings this document forward. I think it was stamped in 1963, and basically it's a document that says if a child approaches you in the confessional and says, this priest hurt me and so, you put the child under interdict, which is silence. And then if the child persists, then they threaten to excommunicate the parents and the whole 9 yards.
Wow, so this is a real piece of paper, real record. So it's not something made up for the movie or any of this?
No, this was found by a canon lawyer who's supposed to try to handle these matters. I think it was back in the time of Reagan. I think he was commissioned by the Vatican to look into it. And he did, and he was warning them.
All right, so they make it totally clear what they can do, right? That's completely clear, right?
Yep.
That's it can't get more explicit than that.
And it follows and it draws on the history. Like, we as Americans don't understand the concept that there really are people out there or nations that want control over us, 100%. And so to me, this whole matter of, you know, a priest sexually assaulting a child, it doesn't stay at that level. Because in society, if you look at how devastating sexual abuse is, which I've done this, I've gone to try to change the statute of limitations up in Boston when all that was going down. That's in the newspaper too. And basically what happens is when something like that takes place, it tears the fabric of your society apart. I mean, look at all the days where most of these people, these kids who are abused by priests, especially because of the power differential, they end up killing themselves or slow death. And you've got serial offenders now coming out in the news with 301 priests and so forth. To me, I want to make it abundantly clear that if someone stops at this issue and just leaves it within the court of studying sexual abuse, they're missing the big picture. In my opinion, there's only other times in culture, the only other times in culture where you have the mass sexual abuse or rape of a nation is when there's a military conquest over that nation. So in my mind, I'd like to draw some parallels here because I believe in my heart, and I brought this to Donald Trump's attention through documentation and very clear memoranda, that I believe since 1933, and there's been a plot it's been well documented by Charles Chiniquy to Abraham Lincoln, going back even to the Civil War times, warning Abraham Lincoln, you're gonna get killed. You're on the Jesuit list. He was an ex-priest.
And so
warning him.
And so is that who is the one who's the conqueror in your opinion?
Yes, the Pope.
Is it it's the Pope that has conquered the United States, is
Absolutely.
what you're saying?
Meaning the Holy See, or the unholy See, you know, through the means of agreement on paper, okay? We've had Samuel Morse, and of course you can get all this history. I didn't bring the book because it was too big. But the Vatican Assassins, written by Eric John Phelps. That is about a thick, probably, I don't know, 2,000-page book. Really, really powerful, and it illustrates the history of what we're talking about. That Abraham Lincoln was killed by the Jesuits. It's been documented. He documents that very clearly. He goes into the JFK assassination, and he talks about the stark connections between how the Jesuits, when we became a free nation after, you know, the Revolutionary War, we weren't free for too long afterwards.
Right.
And that has a lot to do with the fact that the Jesuits, through their banking arm and through their the Pope through their military arm, which is these sovereign orders that are out there of Malta and so forth, Knights of Columbus and all these other things, people think that they're a benign, you know, order or a group. They're not anywhere near being benign. As you found, I think you found something you might like to comment to about that.
Well, I might know a couple of people here and there.
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen some things. I know some folk.
Yeah.
But then, so we have that they wish to conquer the U.S. Well, has it not been conquered in their eyes yet? Are they not done with their job?
They are now in the polishing off part of war, because when you go in, first of all, you know, you have to degrade the country, and that's what they did through Obama, okay?
You have to break the spirit of the
break it down. And now, with this child abuse stuff, you know, this was all being brought forward by former detective Jim Rothstein, who was friends with Father Ritter, who was collecting data. This was back in the Spellman's days, you know? I think it was around the 60s or so. And under Paul VI, a lot of this stuff was going on because Paul VI was the Pope who was trying to create an environment where basically the conquest happens through this thing called the Lavender Mafia. The Lavender Mafia is basically where priests who are good priests that love the Lord and want to live a righteous life, are no longer allowed to go in the seminaries, and they only accept homosexuals. Now again, I'm not talking about the homosexuals that are just, they're into consent. They want a consensual relationship. These guys are the opposite. These guys are not into consent.
So are they more the extremists of that particular order? They're the true believers, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so those are the guys that they want because they're easier to control, obviously.
Absolutely. And it is, and Leo Zagami would talk about that through the Coranzon ritual of the rape of they call it the fountain of youth.
And to maintain it is something that everyone should be doing because of their exposure.
That's right.
Right, as brought up in that document. Okay, here I gotta pause it. As brought up in that. Oh yeah. Okay, let's start.